Was good, Jake here with the second part of the remake being done in installments debate. Did a video on this a couple of weeks ago covering the top 3 reasons why I firmly believe why Square Enix have no choice but to do the remake episodically. The main reason, or the main takeaway from that video, being that although the original game took around about the original text-based descaled game took 40 hours just for the mainline story alone, in the remake will easily take in excess of 120 hours plus. Now, for anyone who didn't watch those videos, I'll quickly cover those points now. The first was scale. In the original, it took around about 10 seconds to walk from Nibelheim to Rocket Town, 6 seconds from Midgar to Calm. Your character was a giant on the map. Everything was descaled, and in the remake, doing it to today's graphics, today's standards, and a realistic scale, takes the traverse time of the original, which was around about 10 hours of just traversing from point A to B, to around about 50 hours in the remake. That was point number 1. Point number 2 were the scenes themselves. Now, I took a scene, Lucretia scene in particular, from the original, in 40 seconds of text-based, unanimated, unvoice acted sort of acting. 40 seconds concluded the entire start and the entire finish of Lucretia's scenes. It wrapped up in entire scenes. But in Dirge of Cerberus, a fully animated, fully voice acted cinematic, 40 seconds barely even sets the scene. In 40 seconds, Vincent hasn't even walked in, you haven't even had a snapshot of Lucretia yet. Go to the last video and you'll see that. But basically, the scenes themselves can easily take in excess of 5, 6, up to 10 times longer. When you have to voice act, animate them, there has to be expressions, emotion, inflection in his voice, etc, etc. And the third point was characters. The Final Fantasy VII universe since the original has become infinitely larger, and the remake has to cover that. So Zack Fair can't just appear in the remake for 20 seconds like he does in the original. People will feel underwhelmed by that. Jesse, Biggs and Wedge, Vincent, they want to see more of these characters. What I didn't cover in the last video is people want to see more backstory of existing characters who have become infinitely larger since the original. But there's also characters like Genesis, who didn't even exist in the original. While we might not see him in the remake, I think people would like to see flashbacks to Genesis. They'd like to see hints of Genesis. Or take Cisne, for example. We never saw what really happened to her after Crisis Core. Them doing a remake is a perfect opportunity for us to see what happened to Cisne. And there are 100 other characters I can name across the franchise who weren't even there in the original, who we'd like to see more on in the remake. So that was point number 3. And those 3 points combined, most people accepted that it got generally well received, that video, that the remake storyline alone can easily be triple what the original game was. But there were some comments, the negative comments, that fine, can accept that it's going to take 3 times longer, but they can still do that in one installment. Now, I'm sure we've all seen these comments of, so what if the remake takes, the mainline story takes 120 hours? The Witcher 3 was that long. Xenoblade fucking Chronicles was that long. You can tell this pisses me off. I can't watch a single remake video without seeing the Witcher 3 reference somewhere. Why can't the remake be 150 hours if The Witcher 3 was 150 hours? Or Bloodborne was X long, or Dark Souls was X long. Okay, and there's this sort of idea that if this game could be 200 hours long, then every game can be 200 hours long. That's not the case, and that's why I wanted to make this video of not all content is equal. Not all content is equal. 200 hours in one game and 200 hours in another game can be vastly different, and why it will be vastly different in the remake. I'm going to go straight into it. Hope you enjoy this video. Let's go. Point number one, and that is what the world actually consists of, what it is built up of. That will always be point number one. You know, these games that people keep talking about, Witcher 3, Xenoblade, trying to use those as comparisons. And in this video example, I'm using Witcher 3. Those worlds are built mostly up of vast sprawling landscapes. Something that the FF7 original did not have. That is mostly comprised of towns and cities, and there's a lot of them. And they are very different. No, a lot of towns, a lot of cities, all with very different stylized themes and artwork. Now, is one 100-hour game built mostly of vast sprawling landscapes equal to another 100-hour game comprised mostly of towns and cities? No, they are not equal. They could both take the exact same time to walk through, but they are not equal in terms of development. Okay, now I can't speculate whether the remake is going to have vast sprawling landscapes. I can't even speculate whether it's going to be open world. But taking that completely out of the equation, just going on the towns and cities alone, the world of Final Fantasy VII being remade vastly dwarfs The Witcher 3 and Xenoblade Chronicles. You know? Their world, vast sprawling landscapes, a lot of those you can copy and paste and just tweak the texturings. Endless expanses of snowy fields or mountains or forests is never going to be as difficult to create as a town or city that you have to fill with NPCs. To create a lively, vibrant town, you have to fill it with NPCs. There's texturing of cars, bins, a lot more smaller details. The buildings, the street you're walking on, lighting effects, street lights, car lights, sign lights, even sound effects. The sound effects of an active city like Midgar is going to be vastly bigger. There's going to be a lot more of it than there is in a forest, in an empty forest. So that's point number one as to why not all content is necessarily equal, even though it might be the same physically in size. Point number two, characters. Now, what is going to take longer to develop? This is the thing about everything to do with the Final Fantasy VII remake. On every single video I see people complaining, and it shouldn't wind me up as much as it does, but it does. I let it get to me, and the reason I let it get to me is because people don't think, and it infuriates me. Think about it. What is going to take longer? A 100-hour RPG that has 2 characters in it, or a 100-hour RPG that has 200 characters in it? Okay? When I see people making these arguments, that game was, this size, so this game can also be this size. Well, no, it can't. Because what would be longer? A game with 2 characters or 200? Of course, the game with 200 characters would be infinitely larger. The scale of creating that RPG is much larger. Yes, the game times are the same, but it's going to take you a hell of a lot longer and cost a hell of a lot more to voice act and animate 200 characters as opposed to 2. Now, I know that's an extreme example, but that does apply. Take games like Bloodborne. According to Wiki, that only has 22 characters. Now, if we look at, and that's quite a large game, comparably large to the Final Fantasy VII original. But if we look at Final Fantasy VII, the original, how many characters does that have? Now, I pulled this up. I'm not going to count all of those characters. I can see a ruby weapon there. I'm not going to count all of those characters. Some of those are too insignificant. So I highlighted all of the ones that are significant, will require a voice actor of some sort, will require animation, detailed animation, cinematic animation. 63 characters. So almost 3 times as many as Bloodborne had. You can see I originally included Mr. Dolphin on my list, and then I squiggled him off. I'm sorry, Mr. Dolphin, no disrespect to you, but I don't think you make the main character list. But 63 characters to be fully voice acted and animated is going to take a lot more development time than Bloodborne's 22. Now, I'm not saying that to have a dig at Bloodborne. You know, I get it's not a character-based game. I get it's not an RPG per se. But I'm using that as an example to show what the Final Fantasy VII Remake is up against. You know, Bloodborne has an average playtime about 65 hours, as does FF7 the original. But FF7 has a much higher character roster than Bloodborne. And in turn, it also has a much larger monster roster, but that's a completely other point. You know, I can't talk about that because that's speculation. You know, the characters, I can be confident that those characters are going to be in it. I would like to think that they're going to bring over most of the original monster roster from the original game. I think most people want that, and that alone would also make FF7 Remake massive, but that's for another time when we get more clarification on that. But back to the characters. It's not even the fact that FF7 has such a large character roster of 63 characters to work with. It's the frequency with which they are used. If you think back to the original game, think of most of the scenes throughout. They have multiple members of the core party. You know, Barrett, Tifa, Cid, Yuffie, Vincent, Kate Sith, Aerith, etc, etc. Most scenes have at least 3, 4. In a lot of cases, it has the entire party there. Now, why is that? Why is that an issue? Because a scene that, and you notice I'm not talking about game engine at all. Now, I think most people are intelligent enough to know that a game created with a high-end engine and the top-end graphics is not equal to a game being done with a low engine. I don't think I need to point that out. But taking the engine completely out of the equation, a game that a cinematic that is comprised of 10 characters will take a lot longer and a lot more time and effort to develop than a cinematic that is comprised of only 2 or 3. Take Lightning Returns, where you have, you know, Noel, Caius, Yule, but the Veils of Snow, Lightning, the entire cast. It would have taken longer to animate the end of Lightning Returns than, say, the ending of 13-2, where you only had Noel, Sarah and Mog, really, and a bit of hope. So, you know, and we go back to The Witcher 3, or your Bloodborne, or your Dark Souls. What will you notice about all of those? All of those have one main protagonist that you follow throughout the game, and if you watch the movies, you'll see it. Most of the scenes in those games, you have your main protagonist, and he's interacting with 2, at most 3, other characters in the game, if that. Now, you don't have that with FF7 the original. Like I said, most scenes are comprised of many, many characters. You know, at times when the core party are going up against the Turks, you know, you could have up to about 12 characters, 10 characters in any given moment in Final Fantasy VII. And that presents a whole bigger issue. So that's point number 2. Point number 3, when we first found out about the remake being done in installments, Square said it was because the game was too big. The internet then exploded with comments of bullshit, won't exceed the gigabyte capacity of the PS4, won't be too large. Do you know how big Blu-ray discs are now? And that was extremely painful to watch or read, because I would have thought that anyone with an ounce of common sense would have realised that when Square would talk about it being too big, they weren't talking about gigabytes. They were talking about scale. The scale of the game is too large. So that was extremely painful to watch, and Square saw that confusion, and I strongly believe that's why they gave us some further clarification on that. That each section of the remake is going to be the size of a full game. In particular, a 13 game. Now, by them saying that, they've actually given us a quantifiable metric, a measurable size. They've actually given us something we can measure with that statement. But I'm still seeing people saying, well, they've said it's going to be a full game, but I bet it'll still only be 15 hours long. No. What the actual fuck? Square are not going to say that each section of the remake is going to be the size of a 13 game and then release 15 hours worth of content. So why people are still making those comments blows my mind. Because we can now be assured of a number of things. That each section of the remake is going to have a mainline story of 40 hours. A comfortable 40-hour mainline story. With an average playtime of around about 60 to 70 hours. And 100 plus with optional content on top of that. Now, I've even seen people go as far as to say that the 13 trilogy could have been done in one installment. Now, that's realistically what it gets down to. If you are saying that the Final Fantasy VII Remake can be done in one installment, your opinion is it can be, then you're also saying that the 13 trilogy could have been done in one installment. And that makes you insane. And that makes you insane for a number of reasons. Looking at now I will admit The Witcher 3 is a big game, with an average playtime of 133 hours. I will even admit its cutscenes and movies. Whenever a game comes out, there's always that guy who will compile all the cutscenes, movies, story and plot into one full-length movie. And The Witcher 3 was 13 hours. Exceptionally large compared to each section of the 13 trilogy, which had around about 7 to 9 hours movies. But if the remake is going to be the size of the 13 trilogy, that means that the Final Fantasy VII Remake, we now have an idea that once the 7 Remake comes out, and the person who inevitably will compile all of the cutscenes and cinematics into one YouTube movie, it's going to be around about 25 hours long. Now show me one, what's that versus? Show me one other game that was one installment whose movie is 25 hours long. Okay? The Witcher 3 is about the longest at 13 hours. So how anyone can expect a game to be twice the size of The Witcher 3 and still be done in one installment blows my mind. But if anyone takes anything, it's that. If anything takes anything away from the video, it's that. Point number 4. My last point is cost. Cost. Square Enix have to do the remake in a way that is financially viable for them. Shock horror. I know that might be an absolute shocker to some people, because some people seem to expect that, Square Enix, they should do this one for the fans. Final Fantasy VII is a beloved game. They should do this one for the fans. They shouldn't try to make money off of this. I've seen those comments as well, and they're probably the most fucking retarded of them all. Square Enix are a business. They are in it to make money. Okay? It doesn't matter how much a fanboy you are of 7. I'm a fanboy of 7. Yeah? It doesn't make it any more sensible for you to turn around and say, oh yeah, you know, Square Enix, they should just take a £30 million hit for the fans? Not going to happen, and there's no reason why it should happen. Now, going back to not all content is equal. Not all gaming content is equal. People seem to think that the longer the game is, the more expensive it is. Oh, The Witcher 3 is huge! The Witcher 3 is huge! It's a huge game! Yes, it is a huge game. And it's twice the size of the Final Fantasy VII original. But if we pull up actual cost numbers, this is straight off of Wikipedia. Most expensive games ever made. Final Fantasy VII, look how close to the top it is. Now, granted, a lot of that is marketing, so I'm going to concede that. Okay, taking marketing costs out of it. Scroll down to The Witcher 3. There it is. That had a very similar development cost. I mean, we might as well call them exactly the same: 46 mil and 45 mil. But one game takes twice as long to play as the other. So that is what I mean by not all content is equal. 50 hours of content can be just as expensive and can take just as long to develop as 100 hours. And people don't seem to get that. People do not seem to get that point. Just because a game is twice as long doesn't mean it's twice as expensive or it takes twice as long as to develop. That's not true at all. A 50-hour game can be equivalent to a 100-hour game. Now, if we scroll right down to the bottom of that list, there it is. Final Fantasy 13. $65 million development cost, or 65 plus. I think it was because of the year and a half that Square worked on 13, or they say they wasted about a year and a half trying to sort of iron things out. That cost, I believe they said, is even up to 80 million. Now that makes Final Fantasy 13 more expensive than both FF7 and The Witcher 3. So by people's logic, Final Fantasy 13 should therefore be the longest, right? Well, that's not true at all. Witcher 3, 133-hour game time. FF7, 61 hours, and 13, 64 hours. So Final Fantasy 13, its game time is about half, well, it's actually less than half of The Witcher 3, but costs considerably more, and that's because of the content. Not all content is equal. Now, with the Final Fantasy 13 game costing around about 80 million, we know that 13.2 and Lightning Returns were cheaper. We know that. But they were not as cheap as people make them out to be. 13.2 and Lightning Returns had a lot more development put into them than I think people make out. You know, I see a lot of people sort of saying, oh, 13.2 and Lightning Returns, they cost fuck all. You know, that was just Square cashing in a bit of extra money, cost fuck all to make. Not true at all. Lightning Returns in particular, back in 2012, the art director for Lightning Returns came out and told us in an interview with Famitsu that pretty much everything in the Nova Crystallia world in Lightning Returns was being built completely from the ground up. Now, while it didn't reach 13's level of development cost, it still was not cheap to make. And the Final Fantasy 13 trilogy is estimated to have cost around about 120 million US dollars to make. That's the best price we can put on the FF7 remake. That would make it one of the most expensive. No, it would make it the most expensive RPG ever made. Now, what do Square do with that? What do Square do with that? A lot of people are saying, well, they still do it in one installment. Okay, fine. If they have to do it in one installment, they're going to charge us 100 quid, 110 quid for the game. Are people going to be pissed off by that? Yes. So what are Square's other options? Well, they could take a gamble and sell it to us for 60 quid, but they'll need to flog about 13 million units. Now, considering that the last X number of Final Fantasies have only sold around about 6 to 9 million, 6 to 8 million even, that's not a gamble Square can make. They can't gamble on selling 12 million. They're being very ambitious with Final Fantasy 15 at 10 million. Now I know the FF7 is popular, but for any RPG to sell 12 million units right now is a bit of an ask. Okay, games like Call of Duty, unfortunately, have a much higher player base. RPGs, on the other hand, do not. So, realistically, Square's best option, and they have taken that option, is to do it in installments. And they will likely charge us 40-50 quid. And rightly they should. If we are getting the content, there is no reason that they should not be charging us that. But that's the only way. We badgered Square to do this remake. And they held off for such a long time. And I believe that the reason for that was because of cost. They could not afford to do the remake. But we, as a fan base, badgered them in to do it. So we have to expect Square to do this in a way, whatever way they can, to make it affordable. And doing it in 3 installments is the best way. And the last point I want to leave on, and I kind of touched this on the last video, is if you're one of the people complaining about the installment, about it being done in installments, what are you complaining about? What do you want? So you want Square to do the Final Fantasy VII remake in 1 installment. You want them to create one of the longest, most expensive RPGs ever made, but you only want them to charge you 50-60 quid for it. That's realistically what you are asking. You are asking Square Enix to make a huge loss, make one of the biggest, most expensive games, and make a huge fucking loss on it. You can tell it really pisses me off. It really pisses me off. Now, even if you are one of those people, there's a way you can actually get what you want. There's a way, believe it or not, and I'm going to share it with you, that you can get one of the longest, most expensive games ever made for only 50-60 quid. And that is wait for it. Wait for it. We can expect every section of this installment to be about a year, 2 years, probably 2 years apart. Now, if you want this in 1 installment and you don't want to pay through the teeth for it, then you wait for it. You wait till the 3rd installment comes out, and then the 1st and 2nd part of the Final Fantasy VII remake will be cheap. Yeah. By the time Lightning Returns came out, you could pick up 13 and 13.2 for about a tenner. Yeah. By the time the last section of the remake comes out, they'll probably do a trilogy pack, put all 3 games together, and it'll be, I don't know, 65, 70 quid, whatever it is, 80 quid, I don't know. But by the time Lightning Returns came out, you could have bought the entire trilogy for about 70 quid. Now, that just means you have to wait. Which, if you're one of these people who want the FF7 remake, if you're pissed off they've done it in installments, then that means you'd be happy for them to release this in 5 years' time. Sort of around 2021, 2022. Okay? You can't expect Square, unless of course you're expecting Square to make the most expensive game ever made, the longest RPG ever made, and develop all of that in 2 years. There's probably people who do expect that. I don't know. I've kind of fucking given up. I hope this video gets out to at least a couple of people, as a bit of an eye-opener on what Square are up against and just how completely wrong the fan base is on this. I can't watch a single Final Fantasy VII Remake video or read a single article without seeing in the comment section the most liked comment being some bullshit rant about how Square doing this episodically is them milking us for money. No, greedy, money grabbing, disgusting, disgraceful, ruined it, all these kind of comments. And really, when you get down to it and when you use your fucking brain, you'll realise it's because Square don't have a choice. I'm done. I'm not going to rant anymore. I need to go make myself a coffee.